I didn't want to go to the dinner. I had a feeling, the kind that settles in your chest like cold weather coming, that something was going to go wrong that night. My daughter-in-law, Vivienne. No, wait. I need to stop myself. That name's already taken. Let me start again properly. I didn't want to go to the dinner. I had that feeling. The kind that settles low in your chest before a storm, when the air goes still and the birds stop, that something was going to go wrong. My son Friso had called me the week before. His voice had that careful, measured quality he uses when he's asking me to do something he already knows I'll resist. Mum, just come. It's just dinner. Isabel wants everyone together before the baby arrives. Isabel, my daughter-in-law, I want to be fair to her, and I want you to understand that what I'm about to tell you is not a story about a woman I disliked. I liked Isabel very much. That's what made everything so much harder. Theo had met Isabelle Marchand 4 years earlier at a conference in Ottawa. She was a policy analyst, sharp, quiet, the kind of woman who listens more than she speaks and says twice as much for it. She came from a family in Quebec, old money in the polite Canadian way, where no one mentions it directly, and she had that particular composure that made you feel, in her presence, that everything was under control, even when it wasn't. I am 63 years old. My husband, Robert, passed 7 years ago. Cardiac arrest. A Tuesday morning in November, before he'd even finished his coffee. I've lived alone since then in the house we bought together in Oakville, Ontario. The one with the big maple in the front yard that drops leaves every October like it's making a point. I have 2 sons. Theo is the younger. My older son, Malcolm, lives in Vancouver with his partner, Derek, and they have enough distance between us that we keep things civil and warm without ever quite getting into the difficult stuff. It is Theo's story, and Isabel's, that I need to tell you. The dinner was at the house of Isabel's mother, Colette Marchand. Colette had driven in from Montreal for the occasion, staying at Theo and Isabel's place in the Annex in Toronto. She was the kind of woman who arrives and immediately begins rearranging things. Not rudely, just with a certainty that her way is the correct way, and that the room will eventually agree with her. She was perhaps 10 years older than me, elegant in that severe Quebecois fashion, with silver hair cut short and reading glasses she wore on a chain around her neck, like a weapon she hadn't needed to use yet. I had met Colette twice before, once at the wedding, brief, cordial, in the chaos of 120 guests, and once at Christmas 2 years ago, when we'd sat across from each other at Theo and Isabel's dining table and discussed, with great mutual caution, the state of Canadian healthcare. We were polite. We were careful. We were 2 women who loved the same young man's wife and were not quite sure yet what to do with each other. There was also Isabel's sister, Renée. I want you to hold that name for a moment. Renée Marchand, because she is the reason I'm telling you this story. Renée was 31, 4 years younger than Isabel. She had her mother's cheekbones and her father's volatility. Their father, Claude, had died years ago, and from what little Isabel had told me, Claude Martin was a man who'd moved through his family like weather, unpredictably and without much concern for what he left behind. Renée had never quite forgiven Isabel for leaving Quebec, for building a life somewhere else, in English, with someone their mother approved of. I understood this without anyone explaining it to me, because I had watched it play out in small ways over 4 years. The comments that landed just slightly wrong, the stories that placed Isabel in an unflattering light, the way Renée could make a compliment feel like a diagnosis. I am getting ahead of myself. The dinner was a Saturday in late March. One of those Ontario evenings where the snow has almost given up, but not quite. There were still patches of gray ice along the edges of the driveway when I arrived. Theo had sent me the address twice, which told me he was anxious. Theo over-communicates when he's anxious. Robert was the same way. I brought a bottle of Niagara Riesling and a lemon tart I'd made that morning because I needed something to do with my hands. When I rang the doorbell, it was Renée who answered. She was smiling, that's the thing I remember. She was smiling in a way that didn't involve her eyes. Madeleine, she said. That's my name, Madeleine Fournier. I kept Robert's name. How wonderful. Come in, come in. The house smelled of something slow-cooked and expensive. Colette had apparently been at it since noon. A beef bourguignon, which I thought was a deliberate choice, a Quebec dish in a Toronto house, a small flag planted. The table was set for 7. Colette, Renee, Theo, Isabelle, myself, and 2 of Isabelle's colleagues from work, a couple named Paul and Greta Henriksen who had been friends of hers since university. Good people. Warm, easy, the kind of guests who fill silences gracefully. Isabelle looked beautiful that evening. 8 months pregnant, tired around the eyes, but radiant in the way some women are at the end of pregnancy. As though the body has settled into what it is and stopped fighting it. She was wearing a loose cream-colored blouse, and she had her dark hair pinned up. When she hugged me at the door, I held on a moment longer than I usually do, because I had that feeling again, that low, cold, pre-storm feeling, and I didn't quite know why. We sat down to dinner around 7. For a while it was fine. It was more than fine. The bourguignon was extraordinary, and Colette accepted the compliments with the exact proportion of modesty and confirmation that suggested she had expected them. Paul and Greta were in good form. Theo was laughing, properly laughing, the way he laughs when he's actually relaxed, with his whole face. And Isabelle was telling a story about the office, something about a committee that had descended into chaos over a procurement decision. And she was funny about it, self-deprecating in the way she does when she's comfortable. It was Renee who shifted it. She did it so carefully. I'll give her that. It wasn't one comment. It was a series of them, spaced out across the meal, each individually defensible. She asked Isabelle how she planned to handle maternity leave, given how essential Isabelle was to her department. A question that sounded like a compliment, but carried an implication that Isabelle's value to her employers outweighed her own needs. She mentioned, to the table in general, that she had read an article about women who return to high-pressure careers after having children and struggle to find the balance. She asked Theo, sweetly, whether he was planning to take the full parental leave available to him in Ontario, because Isabelle will need so much support. Each one landed and disappeared. Isabelle answered calmly. Theo answered calmly. I sat there and felt the temperature in my chest dropping 1 degree at a time. And then Renee looked at her sister and said, very gently, "You're not eating, Isabelle. Are you feeling all right? You look pale." Isabelle was not pale. Isabelle looked exactly as she had an hour earlier, which was beautiful and tired and pregnant. But the table looked at her because the table was invited to. And Isabelle set down her fork and said, "I'm fine, Renee. Are you sure? You've seemed, I don't know, distant lately." "Colette, have you noticed?" Colette looked up from her plate. There was a pause that lasted perhaps 3 seconds, but I have spent 7 years living alone in a quiet house, and I know how to hear what happens in silences. Colette said, "Isabelle is tired. It's to be expected." "Of course," Renee said. "Of course, I just worry." She looked at Theo. "She's been through so much, hasn't she?" And there it was. That phrase, that careful, loaded phrase. She's been through so much. The kind of thing you say to introduce something without being the one to say it. Theo looked at Renee steadily. "Isabelle is wonderful," he said. "We're both excited." "Naturally," Renee said. "I didn't mean." She stopped, let the pause sit. "I just mean after everything with her health. Last year." The table went quiet. I watched Isabelle's face change. It wasn't dramatic. She didn't flinch or look away or cry. She went very still. The way a person goes still when something they have kept carefully contained is suddenly in the room with everyone. "Renee," Isabelle said. Her voice was even. "Please don't. I'm just being honest. Family should be honest. I think it's important that Madeline knows, given she'll be involved with the baby." "Renee," Colette's voice. Sharp and final. But Renee continued. "Isabelle had a breakdown last year. A real one. She was in treatment for 2 months. I think that's something Theo's mother has a right to know." The room did not go silent so much as it went hollow. Like the air had been taken out and not replaced. I looked at Isabelle. Isabelle was looking at her hands. Theo had gone very white. Paul and Greta were both looking at the table in front of them with the careful blankness of people who understand they are witnessing something they were not meant to see. And I thought of Robert, actually. I thought of Robert in his last year. when the stress of his business had pulled him somewhere far away from us. And he had not told me, not really. Because he was the kind of man who didn't know how to ask for what he needed. I thought about how much damage is done by secrets held out of love, out of protection, out of the fear that being known fully might mean being loved less. I set my fork down. "Isabel," I said. She looked up at me. Her eyes were bright but her jaw was set. She was bracing. "I know," I said. "Theo told me. Months ago." This was not entirely true. Theo had told me that Isabel had gone through a difficult period. He had not told me the full extent. But I watched Isabel's face when I said it and I made a decision, and I have never once regretted it. "He told me because he was worried about her and he needed his mother," I said. "And I told him what I'll tell you now, Renee. Since you're so concerned about honesty, what Isabel went through and what she came back from is one of the bravest things I've ever heard of, and it has absolutely no bearing on what kind of mother she is going to be. None. Because people who know how to ask for help are exactly the kind of people I want raising my grandchild." The table was silent. Renee opened her mouth. "I'm not finished," I said, quite pleasantly. "I've had 63 years to learn how to say things pleasantly that are not entirely pleasant. I understand you love your sister. I understand that love sometimes comes out sideways. But what you just did, bringing this to this table, in this company, tonight of all nights, that was not honesty. That was something else. And I think you know it." Colette was looking at me. I couldn't entirely read her expression. It was somewhere between agreement and the pride of a woman who wishes she had said it herself. Renee pushed back her chair. "I was only trying to." "Renee." Isabel's voice, very quiet. "Stop." And Renee stopped. What happened next was not dramatic. There was no scene, no shouting, no door slammed. Renee sat back down. Paul asked Greta a question about something. I don't even remember what. Something kind and normalizing. And the conversation moved, slowly, like a creek finding its way around a stone. Colette brought out a Charlotte Russe for dessert that she had somehow also found time to make. And it was good. And we ate it, and Renee was quiet for the rest of the evening. Theo touched my hand under the table at one point, just briefly. That was enough. Isabel and I did the dishes together, the two of us in the kitchen, while the others had coffee. For a while neither of us said anything. I washed, she's dried, the way I used to do with my own mother on Sunday evenings when I was young, and the quiet felt comfortable rather than empty. "You didn't have to do that," Isabel said eventually. "I know. Theo didn't tell you." "Not really." "No," I said, "not the details. But it didn't matter." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I was ashamed of it for a long time. I thought if people knew, they would look at me differently. Think I wasn't capable." "People who matter don't," I said. "And the ones who do, well, you'll recognize them by the look on their face when they think they've finally said the thing you were afraid of." She laughed, a little. Not a happy laugh, exactly. The kind that comes when something lands true. Renee has always. She started, then stopped. She finds it hard. That I left, that I built this. I think she genuinely believes she's protecting me, in some version of herself. "Maybe," I said. "That doesn't make it all right." "No," Isabel agreed. "It doesn't." We stood there another moment. Outside the kitchen window, the last of the March snow was doing whatever it does in the dark, quietly melting or quietly staying. Hard to tell. "For what it's worth," I said, "I meant what I said, about the kind of mother you're going to be." Isabel set down the dish towel. She turned and looked at me. And for a moment she looked about 20 years old. Not young, exactly, but unguarded. The way people look when they've been holding something a long time and someone has finally offered to hold it with them. "Thank you, Madeline," she said. I put my arm around her shoulders. She was warm and solid and close to her time. And I thought about how much Robert would have loved her. How he would have called her Izzy by the second visit and made her tea without asking and fixed whatever needed fixing in their house, because that's the kind of man he was. I thought about how grief makes you quieter in some ways and louder in others. How losing someone teaches you which things are worth protecting. My granddaughter was born 6 weeks later, on a Thursday in early May, when the maple in my front yard was finally full with new leaves. Theo called me from the hospital at 4 in the morning, and I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark and cried. alone, and then put on my coat and drove through the empty streets to meet her. They named her Clara, Clara Fournier Marchand, a name with room in it for everything she came from. Renee was not at the hospital. She sent a gift, a beautiful one, a hand-knit blanket from a shop in the Plateau Mont Royal, the kind of thing that takes hours, and a card that said, Je suis désolée, Isabelle. Pour tout. I am sorry, Isabelle, for everything. Isabelle showed me the card when I visited. She didn't say much about it. She was sitting in the hospital bed, Clara tucked against her chest, with the expression of a woman who has just come through something enormous and is only beginning to understand what is on the other side. Are you going to call her? I asked. Eventually, Isabelle said. When I'm ready. I thought that was exactly the right answer. There are things I know now, at 63, that I did not know at 30 or 40. I know that the people who love you imperfectly are sometimes still the people who love you. I know that shame is the heaviest thing a person carries, and that the moment it is brought into the light, whether by kindness or cruelty, is also the moment you finally get to set it down. I know that families are assembled from whatever materials are available, and that the work of making them hold together is never finished and is always worth doing. I know that some dinners change things, that some silences, broken at the right moment, can open a door that no one knew was closed. I drive out to see Theo and Isabelle most Sundays now. I bring something, bread or pastry, or that Riesling from Niagara they both like, and I sit on their back porch while Clara naps and we talk about nothing important, which is another way of saying we talk about everything that matters. The maple is coming back. The city is loud in the particular Toronto way that sounds like ambition and transit and a dozen languages at once. And some evenings, when the light comes through the kitchen window at the right angle, and Clara is awake and looking at the world with that full, unguarded attention that babies have before they learn to be careful. Some evenings I feel Robert so close it's almost like he never left. Almost. Close enough